She had the world at her heels until she stepped into their shoes. The ballroom smelled faintly of lilies and expensive champagne, the kind of scent designed to suggest generosity while hiding calculation. Claire Harrison stood near the tall windows with a glass in her hand. She had no intention of drinking, watching the room the way she always did at events like this, detached, observant, like a guest in her own life. Boston charity galas followed the same script every year. Marble floors, warm lights, orchestral covers of pop songs, men discussing donations as investments, women trading polished smiles while assistants handled the real work. Money dressed up as compassion. Claire knew every gesture by heart because she had been trained for it since childhood. Stand straight. Speak softly. Never argue. Never embarrass the family. Judge Harrison's daughter did not cause scenes. She represented stability, legacy, control. Tonight's event funded urban rehabilitation initiatives, which really meant tax advantages and good press. She had already shaken 30 hands and forgotten 30 names when a sharp voice cut through the rehearsed politeness near the registration desk. It wasn't loud, but it was real, unfiltered, irritated. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking you to look at the numbers. Claire turned before she realized she had moved. A man stood across the table from one of the organizers, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, hair slightly messy like he had run here instead of arriving in a car. He didn't look poor, just tired, practical, out of place among silk and diamonds. He held a folder thick with papers and spoke like someone used to being ignored and done being polite about it. Your foundation promised community grants, he said. My shelter applied 3 times. We meet every requirement. Kids are sleeping in cars 2 blocks from here while you're serving champagne that costs more than our weekly groceries. The organizer gave him the tight smile reserved for inconvenient people. Sir, this is not the appropriate setting. It's exactly the appropriate setting, he replied. This is where the money is. A few guests stared. Someone laughed nervously. Claire felt something unfamiliar twist in her chest. No one talked like that here. Not without being escorted out. She should have looked away. That would have been easier. Instead, she walked toward him. Is there a problem? She asked calmly. The organizer relaxed when he recognized her. Miss Harrison, everything is under control. Of course it was. Everything always was, as long as uncomfortable truths stayed quiet. The man looked at her, and for a second his frustration softened into suspicion. He clearly recognized the dress, the jewelry, the last name. Are you with them? He asked. Unfortunately, Claire said before she could stop herself. That surprised both of them. He studied her more carefully now. Then maybe you can explain why a shelter that houses 40 teenagers can't get basic funding while this place looks like a royal wedding. His eyes weren't angry. They were exhausted. That was worse. Claire opened her mouth with the usual prepared answer about review processes and allocation cycles, then closed it again. Because he wasn't wrong. What's the name of your shelter? She asked. Second Start. And your? Daniel Reed. He didn't offer a handshake. Like he didn't trust the ritual. She respected that. She took the folder from him and skimmed the first page. Clean numbers. Transparent expenses. No inflated salaries. No marketing nonsense. Just rent, food, staff, utilities. It was painfully real compared to the abstract millions floating around this room. You came here alone? She asked. Yeah. Figured if they wouldn't read my emails, maybe they'd have to listen to me in person. That's brave, she said. He huffed. It's desperate. Their eyes met again, and something shifted, something sharper than curiosity. He clearly thought she represented everything wrong with the system. She clearly knew he was right. Money doesn't fix systemic problems, she said quietly, almost to herself. No, he replied, but it keeps kids from freezing at night. That's a start. The simplicity of it hit harder than any speech she had heard all evening. Around them, the music swelled and glasses clinked, and someone announced another 6-figure pledge to applause. Claire suddenly felt like the entire room was a stage set, and Daniel was the only real thing in it. Walk with me, she said. If security throws me out, I'm blaming you, he answered. Fair. They moved toward the terrace doors, away from the lights, away from the performance. For the first time that night, Claire felt awake, like something unscripted had just entered her carefully controlled world, and she wasn't sure whether it was a mistake or the beginning of something dangerous. The terrace doors closed behind them, and the noise of the ballroom dropped to a muffled hum, like the ocean heard through thick glass. Cold night air rushed over Claire's bare arms, and for the first time that evening she could breathe without perfume and champagne burning her lungs. Boston stretched below in quiet grids of light, traffic crawling like veins of red and white. Daniel leaned against the railing, exhaling slowly, like he had just stepped out of a courtroom instead of a party. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to hijack your fancy event." "You didn't hijack anything," Claire replied. "You just said out loud what everyone else edits out." He glanced at her sideways. "You don't sound like the rest of them." "That's because I practice not sounding like myself in there." He smirked. "That's concerningly honest." She shrugged. "Occupational hazard of being raised around politicians and judges. You learn early which thoughts are safe and which ones get buried." He studied her dress, the silk, the diamonds at her ears, the careful elegance that screamed generational money. "So which one are you right now?" "Buried," she said, trying not to be. For a moment they just stood there, city wind tugging at their clothes. Daniel pulled the folder back from under his arm and flipped it open again, more out of habit than hope. "Second Start used to be a church basement," he said. "We've got bunk beds squeezed so tight you have to turn sideways to walk between them. Half the kids come from foster placements that collapsed. Some just ran. We're not glamorous enough for donors. No sad violin commercials. Just paperwork and nightmares." Claire listened carefully, the way she used to listen to witnesses when she visited court with her father as a teenager. Except Daniel didn't sound rehearsed. He sounded tired. "How many staff?" she asked. "4 full-time. 2 volunteers. Me doing everything else." "And you still came here tonight?" "Yeah, because next month we can't pay heating." He said it flatly, like a weather report. No drama. That steadiness hit harder than panic would have. Inside the ballroom, applause erupted again. Another announcement. Another pledge. Daniel didn't even turn. "Do you ever feel like," he said, "all that money just circulates between the same 10 people pretending to save the world?" Claire laughed softly. "You just described my entire childhood." He looked surprised. "You're serious?" "My father calls it responsible influence. I call it rich people playing chess with other people's lives." "And you're okay with that?" "No," she said. "I'm just very well trained at surviving it." He watched her more closely now, as if trying to decide whether she was mocking him. "So what are you doing here?" he asked. "Family obligation. My name on the invitation doubles the donation numbers. People trust legacy. And do you?" "Trust it?" "Yeah." She thought about her father's house, the heavy doors, the portraits, the quiet way staff moved like ghosts. "I trust that it always comes with strings." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's why I don't take big checks. Even if they'd save you? Especially then." She tilted her head. "That sounds noble. Also kind of self-destructive." "Maybe. But once someone buys you, they get to steer you. I'd rather struggle than turn into someone's pet project." The word pet landed strangely between them. Claire imagined herself at family dinners, smiling on command, dating approved men with approved careers. Wasn't that the same thing, just dressed nicer? "You think everyone with money is trying to own you?" she asked. "Not everyone," he said. "Just most of the ones who write checks this big." He held 2 fingers apart. "They don't donate. They invest. And they expect returns." "What kind of returns?" "Access. Influence. Gratitude. Control." Claire didn't answer because it was exactly how her father operated. She had watched him help people her whole life. Every favor became leverage later. Every gift came back with interest. "You really hate people like me, don't you?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked at her directly. "I don't know you, but you know my type." "Yeah," he admitted. "I do." The honesty should have offended her. Instead it felt clean. No flattery. No social performance. Just truth. "Then why are you still talking to me?" she asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because you actually listened." Something warm flickered in her chest. Small. Dangerous. She couldn't remember the last time someone spoke to her without calculating her last name first. "Coffee," she said suddenly. "What?" "There's a place 2 blocks away that stays open late. Terrible decor. No one wears tuxedos. You can tell me more about Second Start. Properly. Without security watching." He laughed. "You're just going to ditch your own gala?" She glanced back through the glass at the glittering crowd, at the smiles that never reached anyone's eyes. "Yeah," she said. "I think they'll survive without me. Your dad won't kill me. He's not here tonight." "That's not very reassuring." "Trust me," she said. "If he were, you'd already know." Daniel studied her for a long moment, weighing risk versus curiosity. Then he nodded. Okay, coffee. They slipped down the side staircase used by staff, her heels echoing against concrete, his footsteps steady beside hers. It felt absurdly rebellious, like skipping school. Claire texted her assistant a quick lie about a headache and put her phone away. For once, she didn't want the safety net. Outside, the night was colder, raw and real. No chauffeurs, no flashing cameras, just streetlights and the distant smell of rain on asphalt. Daniel shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. So, Claire Harrison, he said, testing the name. Are you always this impulsive? She smiled. Never. That's what scares me. They started walking together down the sidewalk, two people from completely different worlds moving at the same pace, neither of them realizing yet that this small decision, leaving the party, choosing coffee, choosing each other's company, was the first quiet step toward a collision that would eventually cost them both far more than they expected. The coffee shop was narrow, warm, and aggressively ordinary, the kind of place that didn't try to impress anyone. Yellow lights, scratched wooden tables, a fridge humming too loudly near the counter, the smell of burnt espresso soaked into the walls. Claire had walked past places like this her entire life without ever stepping inside. Tonight it felt strangely safe. No one looked at her twice. No one cared who her father was. Daniel ordered black coffee. She ordered the same after a brief hesitation, realizing anything more complicated would feel ridiculous here. They took the small table near the window. Outside, traffic slid by in slow streaks of light. Inside, everything felt still. Daniel loosened his tie and shoved it into his pocket like it had personally offended him. So, he said, wrapping both hands around the cup, this is where you bring all the rebellious charity airs. You're my first, Claire said. I should feel honored. Don't get used to it. He smiled, then opened the folder again, spreading papers across the table with careful precision. Budgets, invoices, handwritten notes in the margins. Nothing glossy, nothing performative, just survival math. Rent went up this year, he said. Food prices too. We cut our own salaries first. Mine's basically a joke now. Why not apply for federal grants, she asked. We did. Waiting lists. Inspections. 6 months if we're lucky. Kids don't pause their lives for bureaucracy. She traced a finger along one of the numbers. Utilities. Heating. It was painfully small compared to the checks she'd watched people sign tonight without blinking. How much would actually stabilize you for a year? She asked. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Careful. That sounds like a rich person question. It's a practical one. Practical usually means someone trying to solve a human problem with a wire transfer. She held his gaze. Hypothetically. He sighed. 200,000 would change everything. Fix the roof. Hire 2 more staff. Keep beds open through winter. 200,000. At the gala, someone had pledged that much because they liked the violinist. Claire felt heat creep up her neck. That's nothing, she murmured before she could stop herself. Daniel laughed once dry. Yeah, that's exactly the problem. It's nothing to you. It's everything to us. The words weren't cruel, just factual. Still, they landed like a slap. You think I don't understand that? She asked quietly. I think you understand it intellectually, he said. But you don't feel it when your heating gets shut off. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. Her worst childhood inconvenience had been the Wi-Fi going down during a storm. So what do you want? She asked. If not donors, not rich foundations, not people like me. How do you keep this alive? He thought for a long moment. Small money. Lots of it. People who give $50 because they care, not 50 grand because they want a plaque with their name. That sounds slower. It is. Riskier. Yep. Harder. Definitely. And you still prefer it. Because no one owns us, he said. We stay ours. The certainty in his voice stirred something uncomfortable and magnetic at the same time. Claire realized she had never owned anything in her life. Not really. Not her schedule. Not her image. Not even her relationships. Everything had always been pre-approved. Daniel sipped his coffee and studied her. So what's your deal? He asked. My deal? Yeah. You talk like someone who hates the machine but still lives inside it. She looked down at her reflection in the dark liquid. My father built our entire life on control. Judges, senators, board members. Everyone owes him something. I grew up watching favors traded like currency. Sounds exhausting. It is. Then leave. She laughed softly. It's not that simple. Why not? Because legacy. Because expectations. Because walking away meant losing everything she'd ever known. Because disappointing her father felt like committing treason. She searched for a clean explanation and found none. Family isn't just a place, she said. It's a system. And systems don't let you exit quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. You do? My dad drank himself to death when I was 16. My mom worked 3 jobs. System didn't care about us either. Just different price bracket. The bluntness of it stole her breath. I'm sorry, she said. He shrugged. It is what it is. That's why the shelter matters. No kid should feel that alone. The way he said it, simple, unheroic, made her chest tighten. Not ambition, not status, just stubborn compassion. It was so far from the men she usually met that it felt unreal. Lawyers talked about billable hours. Investors talked about exits. Daniel talked about kids having a place to sleep. You're dangerous, she said suddenly. He blinked. Excuse me. People like you, she clarified. You make everything else look fake. He chuckled. Trust me, I'm very boring. No, she said. You're honest. That's worse. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. Just full. The kind that didn't need to be filled. Claire realized she hadn't checked her phone once. No notifications. No handler. No schedule. Just this small table and this stubborn, infuriating, sincere man across from her. Can I see it? She asked. See what? The shelter. He hesitated. It's not pretty. Good, she said. I'm tired of pretty. He studied her face, searching for irony, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow morning. But don't expect a tour guide. We'll probably be cleaning something gross. I can handle gross. We'll test that. They stood, throwing away their cups. Outside, the night had deepened, colder now, quieter. They walked back toward the main street together. Not touching. Not quite strangers anymore either. At the corner, they slowed. You sure you don't want me to call you a car? She asked. I take the bus, he said. Right. She almost said she'd never taken one alone before, then stopped herself. Didn't want to sound like a child. Text me the address, she said instead. Tomorrow. I'll come. You don't have to. I know. He looked at her for a second longer than necessary. Okay, Claire. The way he said her name, without her last name attached, without weight, felt unfamiliar and warm. As he walked toward the bus stop, hands in pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the wind, Claire felt something shift inside her life like a loose brick being pulled from a perfect wall. Small, almost invisible, but structural. And for the first time in years, she found herself hoping the wall might actually fall. Claire almost didn't recognize the neighborhood when the taxi dropped her off the next morning. The buildings were shorter, older, brick-stained darker near the ground from decades of rain and exhaust. No doorman, no polished glass, just narrow sidewalks, a closed laundromat, a grocery store with hand-painted discount signs in the window. The air smelled like cold concrete and cheap coffee instead of perfume and fresh flowers. She checked the address. Daniel had texted her twice to make sure she wasn't lost. Second Start Shelter. The sign above the door was small and slightly crooked, like it had been installed by someone who cared more about getting it done than getting it perfect. No logo. No branding. Just the name. The entrance used to be a church, she realized, the faint outline of a cross still visible in the stone where it had been removed. The door creaked when she pushed it open. Warm air and the smell of disinfectant hit her immediately. Not unpleasant, just honest. Inside, the space was tight and practical. Folding chairs stacked against the wall. A bulletin board covered in handwritten schedules. A whiteboard with grocery lists and chores. Somewhere deeper inside she heard laughter, then a loud, "Hey, that's mine," followed by footsteps running. Real noise. Real life. Not the curated quiet of her father's house. You're early, Daniel's voice said behind her. She turned. He looked different in daylight. Hoodie, jeans, sleeves pushed up, a faint smudge of something on his forearm like he'd already been working for hours. Less sharp. More real. You said morning, she replied. It's barely 9. Kids wake up early. He handed her a pair of rubber gloves. Congratulations. You're on breakfast cleanup. She stared at them. No tour. This is the tour, he said, leading her into the kitchen. And before you ask, yes, I have a small staff, but on Mondays, we're all dishwashers. Cereal boxes lined up like soldiers. A volunteer rinsing trays while humming off-key. 3 teenagers at the table arguing about whose turn it was to take out trash. They all looked up at her at once. Not impressed, just curious. One girl with purple braids squinted. "Who's the fancy lady?" Daniel didn't miss a beat. "Temporary dish slave," he said. The girl nodded approvingly. "Cool." And just like that, Claire stopped being an outsider spectacle. She was handed a sponge. The water was hotter than she expected. Within minutes her sleeves were damp and her hair slipping out of its careful clip. No one treated her gently. No one tried to impress her. A boy asked her to pass the soap like she'd always been there. Another kid complained about math homework. Someone knocked over a cup and swore loudly. It was chaotic and loud and completely unfiltered. She felt strangely lighter. Daniel moved through the space easily, checking on everyone without hovering. Fixing a loose cabinet hinge. Asking one girl about a job interview. Reminding another kid about therapy at 3. He remembered every name. Every detail. No assistants. No staff buffer. Just him. At one point he caught Claire watching him. "Still glamorous enough for you?" he asked. "It's better than glamorous," she said. "It's real." He smiled like that answer mattered more than she realized. An hour later her arms ached and her expensive manicure was ruined. She hadn't noticed when she stopped caring. They carried trash bags out back together, cold air biting at their faces. The alley smelled awful. She wrinkled her nose automatically, then laughed at herself. "What?" Daniel asked. "Nothing. My father would have a heart attack if he saw me right now. Doing manual labor? Existing without supervision." He tied off a bag. "Does he control you that much?" She opened her mouth to say no, then stopped. Because the truthful answer was complicated. "He calls it protection," she said. "Protection from what?" "Bad choices. Bad people. Embarrassment. Anything unpredictable." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "So basically life." "Basically." They hauled the bags to the dumpster. Her heels were completely impractical on cracked asphalt. He noticed. "You know, sneakers exist," he said. "I didn't exactly plan on becoming a garbage assistant today. You're adapting fast. Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not. I just didn't expect you to actually show up." She looked at him. "Why wouldn't I? Most people from your world treat places like this like a field trip. One visit, a sad Instagram post, then they disappear." "I don't even have Instagram," she said. "Red flag," he replied. She laughed. It came out easier than usual, less measured. They walked back inside. A kid ran past and nearly collided with her. "Sorry, Miss Claire," he shouted. She froze slightly at the title. "Miss Claire. Not Harrison. Not ma'am. Just Claire." Daniel noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said softly. "It's just, no one's called me that before." "What, miss?" "No. Just Claire." For a moment something unspoken passed between them. Something warmer than friendship, heavier than curiosity. He looked away first. "Don't get sentimental," he said. "I still need you to mop later." "Cruel," she replied. "Absolutely." By late morning she was tired, sweaty, and weirdly happy. She had done more tangible good in 3 hours than at 100 galas combined. No speeches, no plaques, just clean dishes and fed kids. As they sat on the back steps sharing cheap takeout coffee, Daniel bumped her shoulder lightly with his. "So," he said, "still think money fixes everything?" She watched the kids through the open door, arguing over a board game. "No," she said, "but maybe the wrong people usually control it." "Yeah," he said, "that's more accurate." She looked at him then, really looked. The stubborn kindness, the exhaustion, the quiet strength. Her world suddenly felt very far away, like a movie she used to watch. "Daniel," she said carefully, "what if someone wanted to help without owning you?" He held her gaze. "Then they'd have to understand that help doesn't mean control. And if they did, a beat, then maybe I'd let them stay." The word stay lingered between them longer than it should have. Claire felt her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold air. For the first time in years, the future didn't look planned. It looked uncertain, messy, alive, and standing there beside him, hands still smelling faintly of soap and coffee, she realized she wanted more of that uncertainty, even if it meant stepping further and further away from everything her father had built for her. By the end of the week, visiting the shelter stopped feeling like an exception and started feeling like a habit. Claire didn't announce it to anyone. She simply adjusted her schedule in small, quiet ways. Canceled one lunch. Rescheduled a board meeting. Ignored 2 invitations labeled mandatory. Every morning she told herself she would only stop by for an hour, just to check in, just to drop something off. Every time she stayed half the day. By the second morning, she arrived with coffee for the staff. By the third, she traded silk and heels for sneakers and jeans. Daniel's eyes dropped to her feet. Blending in, he noted. "Don't get used to it," she said, though her smile didn't match her sharp tone. "These cost more than your monthly rent." Tragic. I'll try not to spill bleach on them. The teasing felt easy, skipping the formalities of their disparate worlds. She began to stay half the day, sorting inventory and learning the quiet details of the shelter, which kid refused vegetables, who needed the hall light left on, and whose stories of damage never made the headlines. A 14-year-old who slept with the lights on. A girl saving every dollar from her part-time job to get her own apartment at 18. A boy who flinched any time someone raised their voice. None of it dramatic. Just quiet damage. The kind that didn't make headlines. Claire found herself thinking about them at night in her spotless bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering how two versions of the same city could exist only a few miles apart. One with champagne towers, one with shared blankets. It made her father's world feel theatrical, like an expensive lie everyone agreed to maintain. On Friday afternoon, she stayed late helping Daniel fix a broken desk in the tiny office. The room barely fit both of them. Papers stacked everywhere. A cheap lamp. A corkboard full of schedules and sticky notes. Nothing matched. Nothing pretended to. Daniel crouched on the floor with a screwdriver while she held the desk steady. "You know," he said, tightening his screw. "Most volunteers quit after day 2. Am I that bad?" "No. You're suspiciously persistent. Maybe I'm bored." "Yeah, billionaires' daughters are famous for volunteering out of boredom. I'm not a billionaire." "Close enough." She hesitated. "You ever going to stop calling me that?" "What?" "Your world. Your type. Billionaire adjacent. Like I'm some alien species." He looked up at her. "Aren't you?" The question wasn't mean. Just honest. She considered it. Thought about the houses, the schools, the private drivers, the way doors opened automatically when people heard her last name. "Yeah," she admitted. "Maybe I am." He studied her for a second longer, then went back to the desk. "At least you're self-aware. That's rare. High praise. Don't let it go to your head." The screw slipped, and he swore under his breath. Instinctively, she crouched beside him. Their shoulders bumped in the cramped space. Too close. The air shifted. She became hyper-aware of everything. His arm brushing hers. The faint scent of detergent on his hoodie. The warmth of his body in the small room. For a second, neither of them moved. "You're terrible at personal space," he muttered. "You're the one hogging the screwdriver," she said quietly. Their eyes met. The joke faded. Something else replaced it. Slower. He looked like he was about to say something. Then footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Daniel," a kid shouted. "The sink's exploding again." The moment snapped. He stood quickly. "Romance of plumbing," he said. "Duty calls." She laughed, but her pulse didn't slow down for a long time. Later that evening, as they locked up, the streetlights flickered on one by one. The sky had turned deep blue, almost purple. They walked toward the corner together like it was becoming routine. "You don't have to walk me every time," she said. "I know. Then why do you?" He shrugged. "Neighborhood's not great at night. And you think I can't handle myself? I think you've never had to." She couldn't argue with that. They stopped at the crosswalk. A car passed. Silence stretched, comfortable but charged. "My dad's hosting a family dinner Sunday," she said suddenly, not sure why she brought it up. "Sounds thrilling," Daniel said. "It's usually painful." "Then skip it." "I can't. If I don't show up, he sends someone to check if I'm alive." He laughed, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. His smile faded. "He really that controlling?" "He calls it caring. And you call it." She watched the red traffic light glow. Ownership. The word hung heavy between them. Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets. "That's not healthy, Claire." "I know." "Then why stay?" She didn't answer immediately. Because walking away meant losing security, money, her entire safety net. Because part of her still wanted his approval. Because fear was quieter but stronger than logic. "Habit," she said finally. He nodded like he understood more than she expected. "You ever think about introducing me?" he asked casually. Her head snapped toward him. "Introducing you?" "Yeah. To your world. See the legendary Harrison kingdom up close." She almost laughed at how absurd that sounded. Daniel in her father's dining room. surrounded by crystal and politicians. Oil and water. You'd hate it, she said. Probably. They'd dissect you alive. Definitely. So why would you want that? He looked at her steadily. Because if we're doing this, whatever this is, I don't want to be a secret. Her chest tightened. Whatever this is. Not a joke. Not casual. Real. You're not a secret, she said softly. Then don't hide me. The light turned green. Cars started moving. But neither of them stepped forward. Claire felt the weight of two worlds pressing in from opposite sides. Daniel's small, chaotic, honest one. Her father's polished, suffocating empire. Bringing him home would be like striking a match in a room full of gas. And yet the thought of keeping him separate suddenly felt worse. More cowardly. Okay, she said quietly. Come to dinner Sunday. Daniel blinked. Seriously? Yeah. You sure? No, she admitted. But I'm tired of splitting my life in half. He searched her face, making sure she wasn't joking. All right, he said. Let's see how bad rich people food really is. She smiled, but a cold knot formed in her stomach. Because she knew her father. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Judge Harrison never lost control of a situation. And he never ignored anything that threatened his version of his daughter's future. Inviting Daniel into that house wasn't just a dinner plan. It was a challenge. And for the first time, Claire had the uneasy feeling she had just moved a piece on a chessboard her father had been mastering for decades. Sunday arrived colder than expected, the sky a pale gray that matched Claire's mood. She wore a conservative dress, one that would pass her father's scrutiny, heels that clicked like a metronome down the hallway, hair pinned neatly. The house smelled faintly of polished wood and something floral, a scent carefully chosen by her father to suggest comfort and tradition. Daniel stood in the foyer, sleeves rolled down, tie loosened just enough to be casual without disrespect. Claire's stomach twisted. This was the world she had lived in her entire life, and now it was being invaded by someone utterly foreign to it. Her father emerged from the study with that practiced smile that had opened doors and closed arguments for decades. Claire, Daniel, he said, voice smooth, tone measured. Welcome. Daniel nodded politely. Thank you for having me, sir. Harrison's eyes flicked over him like a judge scanning a witness. Nothing escaped him. Posture, tone, gaze, the faint smudge of dust on Daniel's jacket from the shelter. Claire felt the tension coil tighter in her chest. Dinner was a battlefield of etiquette and subtext. Judge Harrison directed his questions at Daniel with the precision of a cross-examination, probing into the shelter's compliance and fundraising with a thin veil of concern. Every mention of Claire's former suitors and their illustrious careers was a calculated strike at Daniel's status. But Daniel didn't flinch. He met every probe with the flat, unshakable truth of his work, refusing to play the game of social comparisons. Each statement was a test, a small trap disguised as civility. Claire's mouth felt dry. She watched her father's scalpel-like precision, but Daniel remained composed, his blunt honesty dismantling every elitist trap Harrison set. Seeing him hold his ground sparked a quiet resolve in her. She realized the only way to protect what they were building was to stop acting like a spectator in her own life. She wouldn't let her father steer him, and more importantly, she wouldn't let her father steer her ever again. Dinner ended without visible conflict. Polite smiles, small talk, handshakes. Harrison excused himself first, a subtle reminder that he still owned the final word. Daniel and Claire remained at the table, sipping coffee quietly. She looked at him, noting the tightness in his shoulders, the controlled breathing. He had survived the gauntlet. She felt pride, tinged with fear. Her father's world was intact, but cracks had begun to show. For Daniel, and perhaps for her. Outside, the carriage of the city waited. The air smelled colder now, metallic from rain earlier in the day. As they stepped onto the steps together, Daniel glanced at her. You didn't warn me. Warn you about what? Your father. The subtle warfare. The social crossfire. I thought you'd notice, she said quietly. I didn't expect him to try to destroy you in polite sentences. He did, she admitted. And you handled it. He looked at her. We handled it. She felt the word resonate differently. Together. Not alone. Not as guests or heirs or visitors. Together. And in that quiet acknowledgement, Claire knew the balance of power had shifted, imperceptibly but irreversibly. And the game, subtle as it had always been, was just beginning. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. At the office, her father's emails were laced with subtle pressure, mentions of networking and reminders of the family's legacy. She ignored them, her focus elsewhere. At the shelter, she watched Daniel work with a quiet urgency that made her world feel theatrical. During one evening shift, as they sorted through donations, the tension of the dinner finally broke. "Your father doesn't just make rules, Claire," Daniel said, leaning against a crate. "He builds cages. I can feel the bars from here." "I know," she admitted, her voice low. "But cages have locks, and locks can be picked." She reached out, her hand resting briefly on his arm, a silent pact. That night, her father called. "Claire, I noticed your involvement with Mr. Reed has intensified. Do you understand the social liabilities?" "I understand them better than you think, Father," she replied, her voice steady. She hung up and stared at her reflection. She wasn't a pawn anymore. She knew her next move had to be deliberate. She would uncover every lever her father held over the shelter and dismantle them one by one. Retreating into her father's shadow was no longer an option. By midnight, Claire had drafted a surgical plan. She wouldn't use theatrics. She would use evidence and timing to dismantle her father's leverage piece by piece. For the first time, she wasn't playing a role assigned to her. She was rewriting the rules of the game. Monday morning, Claire chose her weapons: evidence, records, and the internal logic of her father's own system. She spent the day at the shelter office, not as a volunteer, but as a strategist. By afternoon, they had connected the strings to an offshore entity her father had mentioned during a dozen private dinners. It wasn't a public record, it was a family secret. "He's not just auditing us," Daniel said, looking at the spreadsheet like it was a death warrant. "He's manufacturing a default to seize the property." Claire didn't flinch. "He's using the old compliance playbook. But I know the counter-moves." Daniel watched her, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes at the cold efficiency of her tactics. "Is this how you win?" he asked. "No," she replied. "This is how we survive him." Together, they hit send, merging her strategic precision with his purpose. They weren't just protecting a shelter anymore. They were claiming their right to exist outside the judge's shadow. The following week was spent fortifying the shelter's independence. Claire used her knowledge of the city's bureaucracy to file preemptive clarifications, closing the loopholes her father had intended to exploit. On Friday evening, by the river, the air felt different. The weight of being a Harrison was finally being replaced by the weight of her own choices. "I'm going to face him," she told Daniel. He didn't offer to save her. He simply stood beside her, which was exactly what she needed. The meeting in her father's office was quiet. Claire didn't shout. She simply laid the documentation of his interference on the marble desk. "I'm not here to ask for permission," she said, meeting his gaze. "I'm here to tell you that the shelter is compliant, independent, and off-limits." Judge Harrison looked at the files, then at his daughter, seeing a stranger he couldn't manipulate. He didn't concede, but he went silent, the only surrender he was capable of. Claire walked out, joined Daniel in the hallway, and for the first time, walked toward a future that hadn't been written for her.